So far, we've talked about the origins of grapes and what may or may not have influenced the names of the grapes. We talked about the fog, be a blanket for the grapes, protected from the environment. We talked about appellations, sub-appellations, the Mediterranean climate. We talked about specific areas and what wines come from these specific areas. We talked about how grapes aren't necessarily the name of the wine. We talked about different blended wines, where they're from. We talked about the thickness of skins on the grapes that protect the grapes from the climate that they grow in. We talked about different hot growing grape areas, one part of the world to the other. We compared them. We talked about Bordeaux varietals. We talked about Bordeaux blended wines. And we gave many different examples, including Super Tuscans. And we talked about the different parts of the tongue that wine hits. We talked about cougar juice. We talked about possible replacements for cougar juice. We also talked about high-end champagnes and high-end Chardonnays and what make them so expensive. We touched on food and wine pairings, the highest city of Albarini, for example. Now we're going to talk about the sun. The sun is what makes life possible on Earth, not only for wine, but for people and for animals and all plants, etc., etc. Different cultures had different names for the sun. The Ojibwe language, which is part of the Algonquin language, which is native to the indigenous people in North America, in what is now southern Canada, northern United States of America, called the Sun Jesus. And you can take your time and pause the video and read all this, but the ancient Greeks, Palin un autois hoiesus elalisa legon ego emi to phos to kosmu, which means, then Jesus spoke to them again, saying, I am the light of the world. World or cosmos. Cosmos means the universe, right? Anyways, photosynthesis is the process by which plants turn the sunlight into sugar. So photosynthesis can only occur in certain temperatures, which again fall within the Mediterranean climate, which is why grapevines grow in Mediterranean climates. They have to get a certain amount of sunlight per day, but not too much. Furthermore, they cannot be exposed to too much humidity. That's why they don't grow well around the equator with all the rain and the mold, etc. So Napa Valley sees an average of 260 days of sunshine per year. Bordeaux is similar because it's a similar climate, like we've mentioned over and over and over again. So I just want to repeat this fact over and over again. Now, in Europe, in Bordeaux and Burgundy and Italy and Rioja in Spain and in Champagne, they have all these laws. Some places you can use irrigation, some places you can't. For the most part in Europe or the old world, you have to let nature take its course. In the new world, there aren't laws like there are in the old world, so there are different things you can do. However, there are places in California, like Napa, that might not have to follow wine rules with irrigation, but have to follow the rules of California for irrigation purposes. So it's not just irrigation, but there are many rules that have to be followed in Europe for the wine growing or viticulture of the grapes, and there are not as many rules in the New World, aka United States, Australia, South America, etc. To go along with these wine rules, especially in Europe, there can only be a certain amount of wines produced, and the wines have to fall within a certain alcohol percentage. And you can pause the video and read more about the different wine rules for the different areas. Now, when the grapes are pressed for wine, creates grape juice. In this grape juice, it has the sugar from the photosynthesis process. When yeast are added, just like with bread, the yeast eat the sugar and turn the sugar into carbon dioxide and alcohol, ethanol alcohol to be more specific. All those slides say this information if you'd like to read about it further. Then the wine is stored in either steel or oak, depending on the choice of the winemaker. And as you can see, most French red wines are aged in oak, and most white wines in California are aged in oak. This gives them the buttery cougar deliciousness that is present in the white wines of California for the most part. If you don't want the oaky, buttery flavor in white wine, you'll put the wines in steel tanks or something besides oak. Now, there are different types of oak. The two main types are American oak and European oak. So just like with French wines, where the fruits and the flavors are more subtle, it's the same with the oak. French oak is more subtle flavors, and American oak is more vibrant flavors from the oak. And Rioja wines use American oak, while Bordeaux's and California Bordeaux blends use more French oak. French oak is more expensive than American oak, which is why you can go to the store and buy a Tempranillo for usually less money than a Bordeaux blend, whether it's from California or France. Usually. So to review, now you know how the sun and yeast and oak influence wines.